creative industries have emerged as one of the leading sectors in the economy.
Starting up a small recording studio in my dad's garage is all it took.
My story was more like experimenting with a variety of flavors, baking cupcakes, brownies, donuts.
Breakthroughs are usually when you find a new way to do something.
Oh well, me and my sister set up a fashion label because we just couldn't find what we wanted in shops.
Breaking rules and great stories start with how you dare to do things differently.
So, how do you start and sustain a business?
All these and more as Africa's Global Bank, UBA, presents Mind Your Own Business, a radio program designed to initialize, educate, and motivate young entrepreneurs emerging as strong players in the local and global economy. Stay tuned for Mind Your Own Business, proudly brought to you by UBA, Africa's Global Bank.
This is Mind Your Own Business, brought to you by UBA, Africa's Global Bank.
Good morning and welcome to Mind Your Own Business, brought to you by UBA, Africa's Global Bank. Thank you for joining us this morning. Of course, on our program, we continue to bring you useful insight into how to be an entrepreneur in Africa's largest economy. And on our program today, we are focusing on a very important aspect of that business thing, the legal side of being an entrepreneur. So we're going to be talking about everything from contracts to company structures to corporate governance, everything you need to know in terms of the legal side of your business. And joining us for that conversation today is Samuel Adikamkwu. He is the Group Counsel at the UBA Group. Thank you so much, Samuel, for coming in today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Can you say that again?
Thank you very much for having me.
All right. So we really want to delve into the legal issues. It's extremely important, I imagine. But before that, maybe you can just give us some background into your legal experience. We do know that you're the group counsel at UBA. Can you just help us appreciate the progression that you've had to experience into that role?
Thank you very much. Well, after my call to bar many years ago, I started as a teacher. I lectured for about 10 years before I came into the banking industry. I came into then Standard Trust Bank Limited, which later became a PLC, before as the company secretary stroke legal advisor until 1985 when STB, the then STB, merged with UBA.
Right.
And initially, I became the deputy legal advisor, but since 2007, I've been the group counsel of UBA Group.
Now, what does the group counsel do? What's your purview?
My job basically entails rendering legal opinions to all arms of the bank and the group. Also, anything that has to do with litigation for and against the bank is handled by my department. Drafting, vetting of contracts are handled by my department. So everything that has any legal connotation that may put the bank in jeopardy, if not properly advised, I refer to my desk.
Okay, and how is that working out for you? Clearly, you see Nigeria, the opportunities as the bank interacts with businesses. Give us a sense of the goings on in Nigeria right now.
Now, well, we are in a distressed economy now, depressed economy and all that. Business issues at almost the lowest ebb and all that. But all the same, in fact, this is the more reason why you need to be properly guided in any contract you want to enter into, because from my experience, I have discovered that many Nigerians, unfortunately, do not use legal or lawyers when they want to enter into contracts. They wait until they are in problems, so they use lawyers more to get out of problem than using them to avoid problems.
Right.
But in our environment, with due respect, where we have many people who are criminally minded in terms of fraud, my advice to every businessman is or anybody that intends to go into business, is to seek legal advice before entering into any contract, appending your signature and all that. Otherwise, you may regret it in the end.
Do you get the sense that the Nigerian environment is harsher than perhaps other places? You mentioned the potential for fraud? Obviously, we know about Nigerians.
Well, I must confess that it's not peculiar to the Nigerian environment. It's almost everywhere in the world. But like I said, our problem is that we try to avoid just cutting corners, so we don't seek legal opinion, legal advice before entering into contracts.
And help us appreciate the protection that legal advice brings for an entrepreneur looking to grow his business. Just give us a sense of that.
Well, a lawyer is supposed to look at either draft the contract or look at the contract, review the contract, see whether you are protected in terms of whenever there is a dispute. Can my client or my institution survive under the terms? Are the terms favorable or onerous? Is it a contract that we are bound to sign as it is? If it is not, then you have to advise your client, please, this should go this way or go that way. Otherwise, you have to build in more safeguards to ensure that if there is dispute, your client may not be hurt.
Right. Yeah. I know in many countries, for instance, in the US, there's that opportunity to defend yourself. And I wonder if that is the case here in terms of a court proceeding. But
personally?
Yes, personally. Okay. But would you say that it's possible for an entrepreneur to manage himself without legal advice? Is this something that he can learn? Or do you think that legal advice is something that, after somebody reading and being in school for about 5 years or so, that value is not something that an entrepreneur can just gain overnight?
It's not because I'm a lawyer, but I think once you are entering into any contract, no matter how small, you need the services of a lawyer. You need the services of a lawyer. Even ordinary tenancy, putting somebody in your house, you need to be properly guided legally. Otherwise, I've seen many people, they just wake up, quit notice, you must quit in the next 7 days and all that. Whereas there is a law regulating how you can quit your tenants. So they need, if you issue such a notice, it's almost invalid. It's invalid.
Right.
And you cannot, luckily our law does not allow for self-help. So you cannot, after the short notice you have given, just go and start throwing out the properties of your tenant. That may cost you, you may pay dearly for it.
Right.
So I advise, no matter how small the document or contract is, please get legal advice. Luckily, we are beginning to have many lawyers in Nigeria. So you may even have friends as lawyers who may not charge you or may not charge you much. But please, I advise that you get legal advice before entering into any contract.
All right. It sounds like very wise words, and we'll explore that later on in the program. But before we go into a break right now, we always like our guests to make a music selection. So, Samuel, what would you like us to play for you?
Well, because of what is happening in our environment now, I don't know if you have Sonny Okosu.
Sonny Okosu?
Which way Nigerian?
Wow, blast from the past. Okay, we'll bring that for you.
Yes.
And we'll continue our conversation with Samuel Adikamkwu. He's the group counsel at the UBA group, and he'll be telling us more about the legal side of being an entrepreneur. We're back in a moment.
Coming up on Mind Your Own Business.
It's easier for a limited liability company to get loans from financial institutions than a one-man business and all that, or partnership.
Right.
So I recommend it to everybody, and it's not expensive.
Before we reach the promised land, let's save Nigeria so Nigeria won't die. Which way, Nigeria? Which way?
You're listening to Mind Your Own Business, brought to you by UBA, Africa's Global Bank.
Welcome back to our program. We are speaking to Samuel Adikamkwu. He's the Group Counsel at the UBA Group, and this is Mind Your Own Business, brought to you by UBA. Samuel, thank you very much for staying around. Okay, you give a very interesting example of how a tenant can be protected by the law. Can you just help us appreciate other examples, especially for businesses? Give us some examples of circumstances that people may not be aware of as business owners, and where they can get protection from the law.
At this point, I think I have to start by looking at the various kind of legal structures that one can put in place if the person wants to become an entrepreneur. Our law allows you to do it as an individual, as a one-man business. You can have what we call business name, Wole so and so, trading under the name and style of so and so.
Right.
The problem there is that the business owner is not different from the business itself.
In that structure.
In that kind of structure.
Right.
And therefore, whatever happens to the man also affects the business.
So whatever liabilities the business has as well is the liability of the man, of the owner as well.
Then from that, you can advance to what we call partnership. Partnership, 2 or more people can come together, register a partnership. And in that kind of situation, there must be a partnership agreement or deed that has to guide their relationship.
Right.
At the beginning, there may be no problem, but once the business starts booming, money starts coming in, is then you will know that
it can change the game.
Yes, exactly. So there is need for you to articulate the rights of each of the partners. Are you going to be a dormant or sleeping partner? Are you going to be a limited partner? A limited partner is a partner who just decides to put money, and it's agreed that whatever liability is incurred by the business, all he can lose is what he has invested.
Right.
You cannot call him, whereas other partners are still liable for the liabilities of the business in a partnership.
We hear a lot about partnerships where lawyers are concerned.
Yes.
But is it limited to lawyers? Are there other businesses, or is it any business that can form a partnership?
But not any business. For instance, under the BOFIA, that's the Banking and the Financial Institutions Act, BOFIA, you cannot run a bank in Nigeria except you are a limited liability company.
Sure.
And therefore, you must set up that company before you can even get a provisional license or license to run the bank. Right. So there are a few businesses that you cannot do under partnership or sole proprietorship. Yes, like banking, like I've just mentioned.
All right. Coming back to the question I asked, though, in terms of protection, because I know as we move on to structures like limited liability companies, there is a difference between the managers, the owners, and the business itself. Can you just help us appreciate
when you get
there?
to limited liability companies, which I will recommend to any person that wants to do business, because our problem is that people think that it's expensive to set up a limited liability company. I used to hear my Igbo brother say, the man is rich, he's limited. I mean, once they hear the word limited, he has a limited liability company, they think it means that the person has made money. But as little, you can have a share capital as little as 10,000. That's the minimum under our Companies and Allied Matters Act, CAMA.
Yeah.
You can set up a company with such a small amount.
Right.
In fact, even the incorporation cost and everything will be less than 30,000. Even with 1 million, you can still register with less than 100. That's share capital of 1 million with less than 100,000. Right. So it's not expensive to set up.
But
and the major advantage of having a limited liability company is that the company is distinct and separate from the others. And therefore, if in hard times they incur liabilities, and maybe the company needs to be wound up,
right,
the liability of the company cannot, the owners, the shareholders, even the directors cannot be made to pay it. It's a company, so you have to
come and hold your house or
that
other
is the
assets
major advantage.
Right.
And not only that, as a limited liability company, you are likely to get more businesses. In terms of contracts, there are certain structures you have to put in place. You have to have a board of directors and all that, and the management separate from the board of directors and all that. So you are in that kind of setup that you can have a more structured entity to run a business and even to access facilities. It's easier for a limited liability company to get loans from financial institutions than a one-man business and all that, or partnership.
Right.
So I recommend it to everybody, and it's not expensive.
Right. And I guess the ultimate is to be a public company, perhaps get listed on the stock exchange. Help us appreciate the difference between that and the limited liability company you just described.
Okay, limited liability company, for instance, in Nigeria, you cannot have more than 50 shareholders. The only way you can exceed 50 shareholders is those who became shareholders of the company while they were employees of the company.
Okay.
They are excluded when you want to get that 50. A public company, PLC, it can get itself registered, quoted on the stock exchange. It's not compulsory that once you're a PLC, you must be quoted. But the only thing with PLC is that it allows you ability to get funds through the stock exchange or through the public.
Right.
Who will become shareholders. Right. So it's easier to access equity once you are quoted on the stock exchange. Okay. And you can also freely divest or sell your shares, unlike when you are not quoted or when you are just a limited liability company.
All right. We'll delve further into that, but of course I have to take another break now. And again, I'll give you the opportunity to make another music selection. So Samuel, what would you like us to play?
I leave you to play any music you like.
All right.
I leave that to you.
Okay, I'm sure our producer can put something together for you.
But I don't mind. I don't mind Ebenezer Obey.
You can go old school.
I don't mind Ebenezer Obey. The Kete. I love listening to it. Though my Yoruba is not very good, but I love listening to it. I was just going to ask that.
Do you speak Yoruba as well?
Well, a little.
All right. We will be bringing that for you, and I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Of course, we'll continue our conversation with Samuel Adikamkwu. He's the group counsel at the UBA group, and we'll come back and give you more insight into the legal side of being an entrepreneur.
Coming up on Mind Your Own Business.
You don't just have to go in there and say it's my business. Today you sack all the workers. Tomorrow you recruit another set because it's your business. Before you know it, there is no continuity. Right. The company will die.
Right.
Kò sọ́gbọ́n tó lè dá, kò síwá tó lè wù, kò sọ́nà tó lè mọ̀, tó lè fi dáyé lọ́rùn o. Kò sọ́gbọ́n tó lè dá, kò síwá tó lè wù, kò sọ́nà tó lè mọ̀, tó lè fi dáyé lọ́rùn o. Lọ́jọ́ tá bá bímọ titun sílé ayé, tónílé tàlejò ló máa kí ni kú ewu.
You're listening to Mind Your Own Business, brought to you by UBA, Africa's Global Bank.
Welcome back to Mind Your Own Business, brought to you by UBA, Africa's Global Bank. We're speaking to Samuel Adikamkwu. He's the group counsel at the UBA group, and he's telling us the legal side of being an entrepreneur. Samuel, thank you so much for sticking around. So we're talking about different types of businesses, and we've moved on to public companies. And I think very often that is the dream of many entrepreneurs. They see the Dangotes and some of those other great entrepreneurs that have listed their companies on the exchange. They're now multi-billionaires, but it doesn't happen overnight. And I want you to help us appreciate how the legal structure contributes to that. How you prepare yourself to be on that level.
For you to be quoted, first of all, you must be a public, that's a PLC, public limited liability company. It's compulsory.
Sure.
And you can set out from the very first moment to become a PLC. You can also convert an existing limited liability company into LPSC. There are legal procedures for doing that. You don't just incorporate a company today and get listed the next moment. I think under the SEC and stock exchange rules, you are allowed to operate, I think, for a minimum of 3 or 5 years.
Right.
Before you can apply for listing on the stock exchange. And once it's approved by the exchange, it's listed. And it should be the aim of anybody that wants to go into a mega business.
Right.
Because of the accessibility of cheap funds through equity.
Right.
Because you get money from the shareholders, they buy into the company and all that, and you have that money to trade instead of maybe going to the bank to borrow at a higher interest rate and all that. So it depends on the kind of business you want to run. But if you want to run a small business, I do not think a PLC should be your aim.
No, but
so it depends.
It's definitely something to aspire.
Yes, it depends on the kind of what you want to do. But if it's just a family business, but if you require fund, I think that is the best way to go.
All right.
Yes.
But
serious fund, yes.
But I want us to focus on the preparation for that. And I think a major element in that is corporate governance. And help us appreciate, corporate governance is a term that is used quite loosely. What does it mean, and what's the value of corporate governance for a business?
If you want your business to survive, then you must have an entity that keeps to the rules of corporate governance. And corporate governance is you have to treat the assets of the company as those of the company. You don't just have to, because you are maybe the majority shareholder of a company, then you see it as your own business. Each time you need money, you just call for money, you take it. Before you know it, the business will die. So you have to put a structure in place. You have to be put on salary. You have to have a board.
Right. Tell us about the board. We hear about boards all along. Okay. What does a board bring to the business?
Once a company is incorporated in Nigeria, you are required to have minimum of 2 directors.
Sure.
The directors are also, they may be the shareholders, they need not be the shareholders. You don't need to be a shareholder in Nigeria to be a director. So the owners of the company can decide to appoint directors without being part of it. They can also be part of it. But the issue is that the board is the policy making arm of every company.
Right.
They give direction.
Right. So they monitor direction.
The management reports to them, because you have to have management, those who are involved in day-to-day running of the company. Directors are not involved except executive directors.
Sure.
But the non-executive directors are not involved in the day-to-day running of the institution.
But if you're not an executive director, yes, why should you be involved in my business? What's the value?
Well, in fact, that's why you should be involved, because you are a little bit detached from the day-to-day running of the business. So it's just to have check and balances here and there, to look at what those people have been doing and all. And that's why it's also advised that in choosing your board of directors, try and have people who are experienced
in that area.
who have idea of what you are doing, so that they will be able to guide you properly. Yes. So the board is very, very critical.
Right. And I really want to stay with this point on corporate governance, because very often we see companies begin and they die. And I think you referred to that point, that, if you don't treat the business well, it can actually die when you didn't plan for it to die. And the value of corporate governance in keeping the business going, can you just emphasize that for us?
Corporate governance involves obeying the laws of the land. If there are laws regulating your business, you must comply with the laws. At the same time, you must detach yourself. The assets of the company are not yours. Even if you have 90% of the shareholding, because the company is distinct, is different from you, the owner, so also the assets are. And therefore, once you adhere to this best practice in terms of distinguishing the company from yourself, you don't just have to go in there and say it's my business. Today you sack all the workers, tomorrow you recruit another set because it's your business. Before you know it, there is no continuity.
Right.
The company will die.
Right.
So it's corporate governance is talking about best practice. Best practice.
So everything from the strategy to the execution.
Exactly. Everything. Try
monitored.
And know that the company is different from yourself, and treat whatever you are doing in that line.
No, it's really valuable talking about this. But before we round up today, I really want you to just emphasize the importance of a legal structure from your experience, and just a message to all those entrepreneurs listening to us today. Why is the legal structure of your business and paying attention to legal issues important long term?
You see, a bad judgment can ruin your business. Even when there is dispute, I have seen disputes among company owners that even kill the company, boardroom squabble, or even shareholders that kill the company and all that. And part of them is because certain legal issues were not considered at the time they were entering some of the maybe shareholders agreements or some of the agreements they entered into. So I cannot tell you all about legal now, but like I said, legal is almost the foundation. Even in marriage, every part, yes, it's a contract.
Yeah,
which means the wife has her own rights, the husband has her own rights. Even the children now also have their own rights.
Absolutely.
Same thing when two or more people are coming together to do a business. Like I said, when things are going well, there may be no problem. But usually, once people are involved, you can't expect. Even two brothers quarrel, husband and wife quarrel and fight, even separate through divorce and all that. Then how much more maybe two strangers or even two friends?
Right.
Friends have killed themselves and all that. So I advise any step, particular any contract, right from the incorporation of the company, please ensure that you have a lawyer. You may not have a legal department. It can be outsourced, but always seek legal advice.
All right. Samuel, thank you very much for sharing your time with us. Samuel Adikamkwu, he is the Group Counsel at the UBA Group, giving some interesting perspective on the legal side of being an entrepreneur. And that's where we end our program for this week. Thank you so much for listening. We'll be back with another guest next week. Good morning.
You're listening to Mind Your Own Business, brought to you by UBA, Africa's Global Bank.
For inquiries on Mind Your Own Business, follow on Twitter at MYOB Nigeria and UBA Group, Facebook.com/MYOB Nigeria and Facebook.com/UBA Group, Instagram.com/Mind Your Own Biz Nigeria, or email cfc@ubagroup.com. You can also call UBA CFC on 01-280-8822 or 01-631-9822 and 0700-2255-822. Today's business tips on Mind Your Own Business. Make sure you get a legal backing before venturing into any business. Creative industries have emerged as one of the leading sectors in the economy.
Starting up a small recording studio in my dad's garage is all it took.
My story was more like experimenting with variety of flavors, baking cupcakes, brownies, donuts.
Breakthroughs are usually when you find a new way to do something.
Oh well, me and my sister set up a fashion label because we just couldn't find what we wanted in shops.
Breaking rules and great stories start with how you dare to do things differently.
So, how do you start and sustain a business?
All these and more as Africa's Global Bank, UBA, presents Mind Your Own Business, a radio program designed to initialize, educate, and motivate young entrepreneurs emerging as strong players in the local and global economy. Stay tuned for Mind Your Own Business, proudly brought to you by UBA, Africa's Global Bank.
That was Mind Your Own Business, brought to you by UBA, Africa's Global Bank.